A story that has been hidden for decades has been brought to light by James Garner. Hollywood is full of stories that have been told, but never told. The history goes back to the set of The Great Escape, the famous war movie from 1963. But behind the scenes, things were getting tense, especially between Garner and Charles Bronson, who was becoming a big star. Garner stayed quiet for years and wouldn't stir the pot, but now he's speaking up. What he says about Bronson is shocking and very personal. What made the fight happen? What caused the anger to last so long? And what happened that almost led to a fight? Keep listening to find out. James Garner's story is like a rough coming-of-age tale that takes place during some of the worst years in American history. Not a single thing in his early life was easy. He was born in Norman, Oklahoma, during the Great Depression. Weldon Bumgarner, his dad, ran a hardware shop and did everything he could to support the family. But bad things happened quickly. His half-cream mother died when James was only 4 years old. Years later, James would say that he deeply believed that she died because of a failed abortion. Not long after that, Weldon's hardware shop caught fire, causing more tragedy. Weldon laid rugs to make money after his business went out of business. There was more drinking after getting the new job, though, and the house became a scary place. When he got home drunk, he made his boys sing for dinner. They would be beaten if they said no. Because things got so bad, Weldon finally sent each son to live with a different family member. He seemed to know he wasn't ready to be a dad. Then Weldon got married again and told the boys to come home. It wasn't good that happened. Even worse than Weldon, Wilma, his new stepmother, who he called Red, turned out to be even bad. The boys had to get twigs ready for her to hit them with. James got the worst of it. On top of hitting him, Red made him look bad by making him wear her clothes and makeup to make fun of him. James had hit rock bottom by the time he was in his early teens. At age 14, something broke during one of Red's strikes. He fought back, put her down, and started to choke her. He had to be pulled away by his dad. In the end, James said that he might have killed her if his dad hadn't stopped him. What did Weldon do after that scary moment? He left, as he always did. This time, he left his kids all alone, leaving James to take care of himself. Even with everything, James didn't give up. In order to join the merchant ship at age 16, he lied about his age and dropped out of high school. This was just as World War II was ending. The water was mean to him, though. He got very sick at sea and quickly left. When he got back to land, he worked at any job he could find. Worked at a gas station, as a carpet maker, and even as an underwear model. That modeling job was his first small taste of being in show business. In 1950, James moved to Los Angeles and moved back in with his dad. He was still lost and trying to figure out what was going on in his life, even though it was his second time in the city. Then there was the Korean War. After all, James was still living in Oklahoma, so he was the first person from the state to be chosen. He was sent to fight in the war with the 5th Regimental Combat Team of the 24th Division for 9 tough months. His war stories were like scenes from action movies, but they were true and hurtful. Gunpowder hit him in the hand and face on his second day in Korea. Later, in a terrible case of friendly fire, U.S. planes fired on his unit because they thought it was the enemy. James took a hit in the back and ran for cover. They fell off a cliff as he tried to get out of a foxhole. He hurt his shoulder and made his knees worse. In the end, he said that the troops saw him as just another person to help out. Even in the middle of battle, James's quirks shine through. One night on guard duty, he got a whiff of garlic in the air, and that smell made his stomach churn. He really didn't like garlic, even more than onions. Even if a pan wasn't washed right, he could smell it in the smallest amounts. That night, the smell told him that Chinese or North Korean troops were close. He told everyone on the line, and his unit was ready because of his good sense. While he was home from the war, James did some odd jobs in Los Angeles. He was laying rugs again at one point, this time with his dad. Fredas? He also filled up his gas tank at a nearby gas station, which is where fate intervened. He met Paul Gregory, who told James that he was going to start a talent agency. Paul thought James looked like he could be a performer. At the time, James didn't think much of it. After many years, James saw Paul's name on the door of a talent agency and went inside. That stay that wasn't planned changed everything. James's first real acting job was in a stage version of the Caine Mutiny court-martial, which was thanks to Paul's trust in him. In 1957, James Garner was really hot. That year, he was in Sayonara with Marlon Brando, and he became famous on TV as Brett Maverick, the slick-talking, smart-alecky gambler on the hit show Maverick. Brett and his brother Bart were shown on the show as they traveled through the Wild West in search of money, danger, and the odd poker match. Garner played Brett and Jack Kelly played Bart. From episode to episode, they switched roles as the show's main characters. At the very beginning, it was clear that James Garner stood out. A lot of people liked him because he was cool, laid back, and funny in a sneaky way. He wasn't your typical cowboy with a gun. Besides being smart and charming, he didn't always win fights with hands or guns. Things were going well for the first few seasons. Garner was becoming a popular name, carving out a strong place for himself in the booming Western genre. But then 1960 came along and put a big stop to things. When the Writers Guild of America went on strike, nothing was made in Hollywood. Like many other shows, Maverick stopped getting new episodes. The issue for Garner was that he had agreed to work for Warner Brothers for 52 weeks. Even though the show was very popular, he was only making $12.50 a week, which wasn't much. The company made the choice not to pay him because there were no scripts. Garner didn't like that. James Garner spoke out because he was sick of being used by the company like a pawn. Warner Brothers broke the deal, so he sued them and won. The court agreed with him and made it clear that the company couldn't just stop paying him while they were on strike. Warner Brothers tried to make things better by offering a new deal, but Garner already knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to be free, which meant being able to pick his own jobs and paths. He then turned away from Maverick, but that wasn't the end for him or the show's fans. Then 1963 came along. When it came out, The Great Escape became one of the most famous war movies of its time. It had everything. A risky jailbreak, a heart-pounding plot, and a cast that reads like a who's who of Hollywood big names. The leader was none other than Steve McQueen, who was without a doubt the coolest person alive. He became a real movie star because of the movie. Even though there was a lot going on screen, the real drama was happening behind the scenes, especially between Charles Bronson and James Garner, two of the movie's main actors. At that time, Bronson wasn't the tough guy he'd become in movies. He was still getting ahead in Hollywood. On the other hand, Garner was already feeling great after his success on the TV show Maverick. If these two people worked together, you'd think they'd respect each other. What James Garner himself says, though, is that couldn't be more false. From the start, it looks like Bronson and Garner didn't get along. That's not all Garner had to say about Bronson. He called him cold, rude, and mean. The fights were so bad that Garner kept talking about how tough Bronson was for decades after the movie was over. When Bronson died in the early 2000s, Garner finally got all of those behind-the-scenes stories out in his autobiography, drawing a picture of a man who was not only difficult to work with, but also unfriendly. But Bronson wasn't the only problem for Garner on set. Even his friend Steve McQueen, who became a big star in the movie, wasn't safe. Garner said that McQueen's pride got the best of him while they were shooting Guru. Still, Steve may have had his diva moments, but Garner finally just said it was because he loved the role and let it go. What about Bronson? That anger lasted for a very long time. Now it's time to look at how the group worked together to fully understand why things went so badly. McQueen was the golden boy, and Garner was the TV star who was ready to take the leap into movies. Bronson, on the other hand, still had something to show. Maybe he felt like he had to puff up his chest just to keep up with all the big names. People say he blew himself up and acted like a big star when he really wasn't. Garner said Bronson's behavior wasn't because he cared about the part, but because he wanted to rule the set. A lot of people didn't like that. After years had passed, Garner told a story that really said it all. When the movie was over, he asked Bronson to come over for a friendly game of cards. It was possibly an act of peace or just an attempt to be polite one last time. But things went badly very quickly. Bronson tried to quit a bet he had already made. Not just with Garner, but also with a young stagehand who was broke and couldn't lose that much money. Garner would not sit for it. Things got angry when he stood up for the kid and told Bronson to pay the $50 he owed. Blaine got very angry, and the two almost fought. That was the last time Garner ever asked Bronson to come over. Their fight was over after that. It didn't stop being tense when The Great Escape became a hit. Charles Bronson really meant it when he said he would never work with James Garner again. But fate had other plans. After many years, the two men were having dinner together, each with his wife. Jill Ireland is with Bronson and Lois Clark is with Garner. The women got along right away and talked like old friends. Not so much for the men. Garner and Bronson sat stiffly and didn't say much. They were trying to get through the night without getting into an argument again. But for James Garner, the most interesting part was yet to come. When the Rockford Files first came out on TV in 1974, it didn't take long for it to become a big hit. It wasn't like other police shows, though. It was different and had its own style. The part of Jim Rockford was played by James Garner. Jim Rockford is a private eye with a history of getting into trouble, a run-down trailer on the beach, and a criminal record. His gold Pontiac Firebird, which has become an icon, hummed along with him the whole time. It was interesting how Rockford was different from other action heroes of the time that made the show stand out. There was nothing fancy or smooth about him. He was honest, likable, and always a little down on his luck. The best part? Garner made him do all of his tricks. Whether it was barreling through high-speed car chases or throwing punches in parking lots, he wanted to keep it real. Then there were no stunt doubles. It was just Garner, a car, and a lot of grit. The Rockford Files was mostly about car chases and clever plot twists, not gunfights. But those stunts were not funny. Beginning in his early movie days, Garner worked on his driving skills. By the time Rockford came along, he was a pro behind the wheel. Eventually, though, the stress of all those acts caught up with him as the seasons went on. His back, his knees, and everything else began to hurt. When the 6th season came around, his doctor told him some bad news. He had to go more slowly. There, Garner saw something very important. That's when he stopped being Jim Rockford. He couldn't be the guy doing the acts. NBC also knew it. The show didn't make sense to keep going without him in the spotlight, especially since the costs of making it were rising. Besides all of that, Garner was going through more than just pain. He was in court with NBC because he wanted a cut of the money made from shows.